Which game will be more challenging for the Aggies? The matchup with Auburn on the road or the matchup with Florida in Gainesville?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope everyone had a great week. It's almost the weekend. Lots of exciting weekend activities, I hope, coming up for everybody. But the question on today's episode of Locked On Aggies is this. Which of these two football games, Texas A&M's matchup on the road against Auburn or matchup on the road against Florida, is going to be more of a challenging game? And, you know, those of you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know that when I break down this 2024 schedule, you know, I look really deep into those two games. I break the schedule down like this. You've got your four tough home games: LSU, Missouri, Texas, and Notre Dame. Then you've got your games, you know, you got your cupcake games. Then you've got your road games against teams I think you should beat: Mississippi State, South Carolina. Obviously, neutral site game against Arkansas as well. And then the challenging road games. And those are the two matchups that I just got done talking about. Hitting the road to play Auburn and hitting the road to play Florida. I think road game-wise, those are the two toughest games on the schedule. So we're going to break this down, and I think where these games fall on the schedule plays a role in the difficulty of the game. So the matchup with Florida is actually on my birthday, September 14th, on the road. And you have kind of some cupcake games mixed between. You play McNeese at home, and then the following week after the Florida game on the 21st, you play Bowling Green. So, you know, when it comes to schedule-wise, this game really isn't there's not much where you go, ooh, that could be a problem. The Auburn game is the polar opposite. You play New Mexico State, which, you know, everyone always tells me, and I'll have to send Zach this clip. Zach Blackerby, who hosts Locked On Auburn, is a very a good buddy of mine. And, you know, he keeps making the Cam Coleman jokes. I've got a joke for you, Zach. You know who Texas A&M plays on November 16th, the week before Auburn? Be New Mexico State. Yes, the same New Mexico State team who beat Auburn last year. I just don't want to let anyone forget that. I wish, you know, if I was more of a quick thinker, I would throw that back at them. I should have. But after the Auburn game is the most exciting, probably one of the most anticipated games of the entire college football season, and that is the matchup against the Texas Longhorns. So, you know, I think when you talk about what is going to be, when it comes to where the game falls, you definitely like Florida better than Auburn. The Auburn game, I think Auburn's going to be a team. They're young, and I think they're going to be better than people anticipate. I do believe that. I think that when you look at this, you have to say to yourself, okay, that Auburn game, you know, they're going to have time to kind of settle into who they are as a football team. So will Texas A&M. But that's when injuries come into play and different things there. And then you also add in the fact that you play Texas that next week. I promise you that football game is going to be on the minds of the Texas A&M players. I don't care what anyone says. That is just the reality. I really do believe that those players are going to be looking forward a little bit. And Coach Elko and the coaching staff needs to know that and prevent that from happening, because you cannot look past Auburn. I don't I don't know where I sit on Auburn fully. I think they're going to be better than people give them credit for. I do believe they'll be better than people give them credit for. But I don't think they're going to be anywhere near as good as Texas A&M. So I think that they're young and they're talented. Maybe next year this is a better conversation. But right now, I don't think it's as close as I think some Auburn fans would want it to be. The Florida game, I don't know. I don't think Florida is going to be that good. I go back and forth on that as I do on many things, as you all know. I don't know if I'm a huge believer in Florida. I don't think they're going to be very good. I really don't. I think this is going to be it for Napier. I think he's gone after this year. And on top of that, the schedule they play once again is you just have to feel bad for Florida fans. It is not going to be a fun season for Florida. So now the one thing that you would say is a positive for both Florida and Auburn is they have veteran quarterbacks, playing at home. Peyton Thorne for Auburn and Mertz for Florida. Both have played a lot of college football. They'll get to be in front of their home crowds. That's an advantage their way. And you really can't call Connor Wigman a veteran. You can't. I mean, he's played in like 6, 7, 8 football games, whatever it is, with the injuries and then not playing the whole year, freshman year. You can't call him a veteran. He is definitely still a young guy, even though he's a junior. So that is an advantage toward those teams. Now, I think Connor Wigman is the best of those quarterbacks. I think of those 3 guys, Wigman, Mertz, and Thorne, I'm taking Wigman without any thoughts whatsoever. But when it comes to which game, if you throw out the schedule, if you throw out who they play next, if you throw out all that, I think the most challenging game between these two is the Auburn game. I think Auburn's going to be better than Florida. I also think that Auburn is one of the toughest places to play in all college football. Some might say the same thing about Florida. I don't know if I buy it. I think playing at Auburn is a real challenge. I mean, we've seen that. Everybody remembers that game where the Aggies had to go play and Cadillac Williams was the head coach because they had just fired their old coach, and the place was insane for a game between 2 not great football teams, and Auburn came out on top. I mean, that was Texas A&M fans have seen what it's like playing there. So I definitely don't feel great about that game. I think Auburn is going to be a good football team, and I think it's going to be a tough game to win for the Aggies. And I think that when you go position by position, I think the Aggies are better at a lot of positions and a lot of important positions. I think Auburn might have them at offensive line. I think Auburn might have them at linebacker and secondary could be the conversations, but quarterback, I lean toward the Aggies. Running back, running back, you probably got to go Auburn because Jarquez Hunter is going to be a stud. But you get what I'm saying. I think that Texas A&M's roster and team is a little bit better than Auburn's. Now you have to go to Auburn, and that's where it gets really scary. So, yeah, I'm a believer that of these 2 games, which I think are 2 of the more important games on the schedule. I know that Notre Dame and LSU and Missouri and Texas are huge games, but they're at home. It is so much easier to play at home, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that. It is so much easier to play in front of your home crowd rather than having to go to go on the road and have people yelling at you. And it's just, you just don't love that. You don't love having to go play on the road. It's not fun in any sport. I mean, I played on the road a lot in baseball, and I've got yelled at, called a fair share of names. I mean, it's just part of it. Like, playing on the road is not fun. So these games are going to be crucial for Texas A&M overachieving in 2024. You have to win one of them. You'd like to win both of them. If you win both of these games, you are in a very good spot to overachieve. If you go 1-1, you're still in a spot to overachieve. If you go 0-2, your chances of overachieving and hitting the over on that 8.5 over-under win line is pretty much out the window. So you have got to win one of these 2 games. It'd be awesome if you can win both, but I'll tell you this, it is not going to be easy. I think your route to 9-3, I think you have a better chance splitting these games and then going 2-2 in those tough games at home than you do going 2-0 in these games, and then 1-3 in those tough games at home. I think both Auburn and Florida be a little bit better. People give them credit for Auburn more so than Florida, and then you're playing in some tough environments, which is not going to be easy on this Texas A&M football team. So we're just going to have to see how this kind of works itself out. But I'm telling you, this is going to be two of the most challenging games on the schedule. And two games, if you want to overachieve, you have got to win. We're going to run through position groups, and we're going to talk about depth and positions. Hey, you just can't lose a ton of players here at this position group. We'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So I wanted to have this conversation. I think Texas A&M's in an interesting spot where I feel pretty good all around about the depth. But there are a few positions. Now, we want the whole team to stay healthy. You never obviously want to see a single injury to any team. We want everybody to stay healthy, but this is football. That's not what happens. You're going to lose players to injuries. You're going to have, ankle sprains and hamstring pulls, and, it's going to happen. It's just part of it. So the question is, which positions can Texas A&M not afford to lose a lot of guys? So I'm just going to run through, top to bottom. Quarterback has been a position for years now. The Aggies just can't seem to keep a starting quarterback on the field. Now, once again, Texas A&M this year is in a great spot at the quarterback position. You really could, if Wigman were to go down, you've got two great quarterbacks behind him. Really good quarterbacks. Two of the best backup quarterbacks in all of college football, in my opinion. But let's keep Connor Wigman healthy. I'm serious. Like, at the end of the day, this isn't something I want to have to continue to speculate on. Let's just keep the starter on the field. Connor Wigman is due for a massive season. But for him to have a massive season, he's got to stay on the football field. That is just the reality at the end of the day. If he can't stay on the football field, it's just going to be problematic to the season. Not only because Connor Wigman's the best quarterback on this roster, but you got to remember, yes, Marcel Reed and Jalen Henderson are both really good quarterbacks with high upsides. I like them both. I think they could both start for a lot of teams and be great and win a lot of football games. But at the end of the day, you have a game plan. You have a system made for your quarterback. When your quarterback gets hurt, in the middle of the season, you have, a week to make a new plan that fits, that works, that makes sense. And then you have to say, hey, does this work? And a lot of times, let's say your quarterback gets hurt in the middle of SEC play. It's not like you're going to get a game against McNeese to be able to test things. You're going to be in the middle of SEC play. There's no messing around. So you got to keep your quarterback healthy, and that'll be the goal this year. But it's a position where, yes, you have depth and you have really solid depth, but let's keep Connor Wigman healthy. That is the goal for this season. Running back's another position where, with Smith and Daniels and Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens, you're in a really good spot. And this was a room last year where, you had a lot of guys in and out of the lineup. You had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of guys get banged up. We saw that happen a lot. But at the end of the day, it was a deep room last year, and it's going to be a deep room again this year, especially with the addition of Smith from the portal. So looking at this running back room, and I want to reiterate, I'm not saying, well, if someone gets hurt, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if a player were to go down with injury, thanks to a great job by this coaching staff, the Aggies have plenty of depth, to be able to stay fine at that position. So that is kind of why I sit here and I look at this and I go, running back's another spot where if you were to lose a guy, you've got some really good players behind them and you'd be okay. Now, receiver is where this conversation starts to go the other direction. I don't feel great about the depth at receiver. If you were to lose a guy, if Moose goes down with a hammy or Noah Thomas or Jay Walker goes on with a hammy, you start to get really thin really quick and you start to get really young really quick. So receiver's a position you have got to keep your guys out there on the field. I mean, you lose 2 receivers and then we start to go, oh, we're not in a good spot here. You have got to keep that room healthy. I think receiver is probably right up there. And I'll go ahead and talk about it. We'll move to defense. I'll come back to the other offensive positions. But linebacker. To me, linebacker is the other position. You cannot afford to lose a ton of guys. The depth, once again, it gets really young and really inexperienced really quick. If you lose some of your transfers, you lose a Williams or you lose a DeShields or you lose a York, the depth of this roster gets really young and really thin quickly. You don't want to have to face that. You don't want to have to worry about it. You want to keep York and you want to keep, whether it's the Shields or whether it's Williams, you want to keep them out there healthy. It's a spot where I think you've got some really solid talent at linebacker. I feel good about it, but it's young. It's really young, and you don't want to have to worry about that. That's why I say just keep all those guys out there. Keep everybody healthy, keep everybody out on the field. I think that's the best way to go about it. But once again, it's football. It's just not going to shape out that way. So knowing that injuries are going to happen in this sport, you got to hope that they happen in rooms that the Aggies have enough depth. Back to offense, tight end is a room where, I think now I really want Donovan Green to have a great season. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's coming off that ACL tear. We need to get him, keep him healthy, and he needs to have a great season. But it is a room where you are so deep. You are so deep at tight end. You've got some great players behind them. You've got some guys that have been on the roster for a while in Theo, and then you've got Platt, and then you got the transfers. You bring in 3 transfers at the tight end position. So I think the depth there is in a really good spot. And if a player were to go down with injury, you'd be fine at the tight end position. Offensive line is another one right up there with linebacker and receiver where I go, ooh, man, you are a couple players going down from getting really thin really quick. I think you're a little more experienced at offensive line top to bottom than you are at linebacker top to bottom, and receiver for that matter top to bottom. But still, I think you're thinner. You maybe your depth is a little more experienced, but it's also a thinner depth is what I'm kind of getting at here. So I think my takeaway here is that I'm probably a little bit less worried about offensive line than I am receiver and linebacker, but still you don't want to mess around the offensive line. You got 5 guys out there. You got to have a lot of depth, and I would say the Aggies don't have a ton of depth. So you got to find a way to stay healthy at that linebacker position. Or that offensive line position, excuse me. And then moving on to the rest of the defense. The defensive line, I feel really good about the depth there. I think it's a little thinner than last year. Last year you could have lost 7 guys and still had 8 5-stars behind them. Like, that's just the reality. This year you're still kind of there, but you're a little bit thinner. So I'm not worried about the depth at defensive line, interior, outside. I'm not worried about the depth at all, honestly, on the defensive line. Some people are. I'm really not. I think you got a lot of young guys who can be really good. So I don't have a ton of concern about the defensive line. I feel pretty good about that unit as a whole. And I'm just not worried about that unit. Then would be the secondary. I think both safety and corner, I feel good about the depth now. Look what Coach Elko did in the portal. He went and brought in like 47 guys to come play corner and safety. This room is now officially deep. I feel really good about the secondary, and I think it's going to be a pretty good secondary. We've had our concerns. Obviously, last year it was not great, but all in all, I feel pretty solid about this secondary right now. I think it's deep, and I think it's in a good spot. So I would say, once again, to wrap this conversation up, the 3 positions that you got to stay healthy at for sure are linebacker, receiver, and offensive line. If you can stay healthy at those three positions, I think this roster depth-wise is in a really good spot. Before we call it a week here at Locked On Aggies, I've got a few mailbag questions to answer, some about the offensive line, some about where the recruiting class will end up. We'll talk about those two things coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, we got to talk about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, but there's just not a ton going on anymore. The playoffs are winding down. We get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Olympic stuff. You got so much fun stuff you can go over to FanDuel and bet on. I'm on FanDuel. I use it. It's what I use for all my sports betting. It's a ton of fun. You got to go check them out. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. So the first mailbag question, I've got two I want to answer, some pretty interesting ones. The first one has to do with the offensive line that we just kind of talked about a little bit. It says, the question was, Andrew, where do you believe Texas A&M's offensive line will end up rankings-wise in the SEC? And I'll tell you, if I had to guess, I would say that this offensive line ends up being right around that middle of the pack in the SEC, that 7, 8, 9, kind of, not in the bottom, not in the top, but in the middle tier. I think Texas A&M's offensive line, is it going to be the best unit in the world? No, it's not. I don't think they're going to be elite. I think the sad reality, I think even if this offensive line does better than we anticipate, over exceeds expectations a little bit, I still think that it's going to be in that range. The ceiling to me would be like 5, would be like that 5, 6 range, I think. But I think the realistic place it's going to be is the 7, 8, 9 range. It's not going to be terrible. It's not going to lose you football games, but it's not going to be the best offensive line in college football or in the SEC. So that's my thought about the offensive line. I like they have a lot of versatile players, a lot of guys who can move from the outside to inside to outside. You got a lot of options and a lot of players that I'm really excited about on this offensive line to see what they can develop into and how good of a season they can have. But still, I'm excited to see what this offensive line does, but I think that's the range it's going to end up. But let me know that in the YouTube comments. If you had to predict where Texas A&M's offensive line ends up in the SEC at the end of the season, what number would you put that at? Last question of the day is, where will the recruiting class end up? So, as it sits in 24/7 Sports, it's sitting around 7, unless it's moved. It was, 7 today. But I believe it finishes top 10. I don't know if I'm a believer that it's going to move from top 10 to top 5. I think that 6 to 10 range is going to be where it ends up. I don't know how many more players they're going to bring in. This weekend's going to be important. This weekend's going to be interesting. But I think for the most part, that top 10 range is going to be where this recruiting class ends up. And once again, you take that all day and a million times on Thursday. I mean, seriously, that if you would have told me that Mike Elko comes in and has a top 10 recruiting class his first year, I don't know if I'd have laughed at you, but I'd have really? You know what I mean? I would have been a little surprised by that. So, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I think it's a top 10 class. You're in it for some highly ranked guys like the safety that's getting ready to decide. You're in it for some elite players. So it'll be interesting to see, can they land some of these guys? And if you land some of these high 4 stars or 5 stars, that's when we can start having this top 5 conversation. But I do believe top 10 is a very fair place to predict for where Texas A&M is going to end up. But let me know that as well in the YouTube comments. If you had to guess, where do you believe this 2025 Texas A&M recruiting class is going to end up in the rankings? I say top 10, that 6 to 10 range. Let me know y'all's thoughts. I'm anxious to hear what y'all have to say. That is going to do it for this week here at Locked On Aggies. Thank y'all so much for being here every single day. I really, really appreciate y'all. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, it helps the show a ton. We're getting so close to 2,000. Keep hitting that button. It really does help the show. Appreciate y'all doing that. But once again, I hope everybody has an outstanding rest of their Friday. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday right here at Locked On Aggies.